Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. It is pre-match build-up showtime as Liverpool return to Premier League action this weekend after securing their passage to the knockout stages of the European Cup with a 1-0 win against Ajax. It is back to domestic matters with a home fixture on Sunday evening at 7:15 against Wolverhampton Wanderers. Liverpool starting the weekend in second place while Wolves are down in 7th. It has all the makings of what should be, I think, a very entertaining game. The games between these sides normally are. They tend to be tight and well contested affairs as well. And also with it being the last match of the weekend, Liverpool coming on the heels of the game between Tottenham and Arsenal. It'll also be very interesting in terms of what Liverpool know going into the game about what a good result will mean for them. Obviously, we're hoping that there'll be a draw or even an Arsenal win in that North London derby, and that will mean that Liverpool will have the opportunity to go top of the table on Sunday evening. But of course, nothing is decided yet, and it is something that's bigged up a lot in title races, who plays first. It's normally a little bit later on in the season. I know it's slightly early to be talking about that. It tends to be about sort of February onwards. You start to talk about which team plays first each weekend and how that affects the psyche of the teams that are in the title race. But I do think if Spurs get a win against Arsenal, then it does put a little bit of extra pressure on Liverpool, because they'll certainly be looking at that fixture as not a banker, but an opportunity for Spurs to drop points and to give Liverpool a little bit of the edge. And knowing that, we're 3 points behind and we have to win might make a little bit of a difference. But the fact of the matter is, with this Liverpool team, they go into pretty much every game with the attitude that they have to win. So I can't imagine it'll make too much of a difference. But as fans, it will certainly add pressure on, I think, a little bit if Spurs have got a result like a win in that North London derby. But on the flip side, if they don't get a good result, then of course it's a massive boost for Liverpool and it will improve our moods immeasurably going into the match. But enough of that. Probably the most important thing about this game is the fact that fans are going to be back in the stadium at last. Since of course the start of March, Liverpool have been playing all their games behind closed doors. We haven't seen fans at Anfield since that game against Atletico Madrid. And yes, it's not a full capacity crowd. It's 2,000 people. There's going to be 500 on the main stand, and the other 1,500 are going to be on the Kop, which I think is very good to see, because it means, first of all, on TV you'll be able to see those fans on the Kop as well, and also it will mean that the players do get that sensation of attacking towards their own end in the second halves, which has always been a big thing for Liverpool in the past. Obviously not so much this weekend because there aren't quite as many fans and they're discouraged from excessive singing and shouting and whatnot, but you do still feel like it will make a difference. And as much as the players have been saying over the last few months they can feel the presence of the fans and they're always doing it for us and stuff like that, at the end of the day, that can only take you so far. The idea that, of course, they know they're doing, that Liverpool fans around the globe are counting on them, but in the heat of the game in that stadium, they're probably just very much focused on getting the job done. And I think the addition of fans into the stadium will give them that extra impetus that I think will give us a bit of an edge over Wolves, because we've got those fans on our side going into the game. And of course, it is, as I said, absolutely fantastic to see, and we're all really looking forward to seeing it this weekend. But team news going into the game as well. Jurgen Klopp had his press conference today, and for once there were mostly positive updates from the medical department. Trent and Naby Keita are both back in full team training today, which is brilliant news after both of them have faced relatively short layoffs. But I think when you have the amount of injury issues that Liverpool have had over the last few weeks, they do tend to pile up and become overwhelming, and a knock that keeps a player out for 3 weeks, normally that's not too much to worry about. You imagine that someone else will deputise and they'll come back and everything will be resumed as normal. But when half your first team has got the same knock at the same time, it does start to become a problem. So it's a very big boost for Liverpool to be getting these players back. I think Naby Keita's probably a little bit further along in his recovery than Trent, because there was word of him being not necessarily involved in the game against Ajax, but certainly he was returning to training in a capacity that suggested he was pretty close to a full recovery. Whether or not either of those players are fully fit for the game again at the weekend remains to be seen. Jurgen Klopp himself said in his press conference that he doesn't necessarily know. Now, of course, if he did know, he probably wouldn't be telling us. He'd be keeping his cards close to his chest. But as he said before, it's the medical staff that decides all this stuff, and he sometimes even goes into the games on the morning not knowing what his lineup's going to be, because he hasn't got the green or the red light from the medical team to let him know whether certain players are going to be able to play and also what capacity they can play. And it's entirely possible that Trent and Keita are available for Liverpool this weekend, but the medical staff warned Jurgen Klopp away from starting them in the game just to bed them into the side a little bit more. And it also comes down to how much training they've had and whether or not they've built up any sharpness. But the headline news news is they're back in training, which means they are at least in contention to play some sort of role in the game against Wolves, which is very, very, very positive news. Unfortunately, Alisson is not going to be available. It's looking like he's going to be out until the middle of the month, which is about 10 days away. So not the worst news in the world, especially after the performance Kelleher put in against Ajax. I think Jurgen Klopp said that he was going to back Kelleher for this game. He was impressed with how he played in midweek. And while he was keen to not throw Adrian under the bus and said his attitude since being not dropped, but I guess that is kind of the word, he was taken out of the side and replaced by Kevin Kelleher as the second choice goalkeeper. But apparently Adrian's attitude has been excellent. So there's no rift there. There's certainly a path back into the first team for Adrian if he shows the necessary qualities in training. But in the meantime, Kelleher is impressing Jurgen Klopp, so he will probably be the first choice goalkeeper until Alisson returns in a week or two's time. Apart from that, a lot of the other lads look like they're stepping it up in terms of injury recovery. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain is nearly there, it looks like. I think this game again comes just a little bit too soon for him, but he's doing ball work and training and stuff like that. I don't think he's in full sessions, so obviously we've still got to wait until that happens before we can consider him playing any role from the start, at least, and any capacity in games. But it is, of course, positive to see him back on the recovery trail. The same goes for Xherdan Shaqiri, who has been in the gym at Melwood, and James Milner, and everyone else who's not available for the first team at the moment. The club have been releasing a few pictures from the training ground, which I think is done with the intention of boosting the mood around the club a little bit. Obviously, it helps when the fans are happy because it creates a generally good vibe, especially when you consider they're getting back in the ground now. So showing them players coming back and players recovering and players at least in and around the training ground where you know they're doing their absolute best to get back to first team training as quickly as possible, then that obviously boosts everyone's mood. And also Virgil van Dijk is back at the training centre as well. It was fantastic to see him posting on social media a little bit over the last couple of days to show that he is back in those gyms. He's out of the hospital. He's not at home anymore. And he is part of the first team setup as well, I think, which is important on your injury recovery. You don't want players being separated from the rest of the squad. You want them to still feel like they're part of it. And obviously that is now happening with Virgil van Dijk being back at the AXA training centre, as it's now called. So as for how I think Liverpool are actually going to line up then, as I said, it's probably going to be Kevin Kelleher in goal, which if you ask me is a good thing because I was very, very impressed, as anyone who watched the post-match reaction show on Tuesday night knows, with his performance against Ajax, and I'm really looking forward to seeing a little bit more from him. Obviously we want to see him tested in more than just one game. He had good moments against Ajax, but it is just a single 90 minutes, and for goalkeepers especially, in a Liverpool team that doesn't really concede too many chances, I think it's fair to say it takes a few games to get the measure of them. That was even the case with Alisson, and it was probably the case with Adrian as well, who had a good start, but as it went on, it kind of became clear that he didn't necessarily have all the qualities needed for a Liverpool goalkeeper. So I'm looking forward to seeing him again, and hopefully he keeps another clean sheet. That will be another huge boost to his confidence and shows why the manager has put so much faith in him. In front of him, I think the centre-half pairing is going to be Joel Matip and Fabinho. Liverpool now with the luxury of having gaps between games. We've of course had this very, very useful 5-day rest after the game against Ajax, and the fact that the Wednesday night game, against Midtjylland is a complete dead rubber, and then after that we don't play again until Sunday. So we've essentially got a week off. You know, I'm not entirely sure Jurgen Klopp will give the whole first team a rest because rules and whatnot probably dictate he has to take at least a few of the big hitters to the away game against Midtjylland, but I doubt any of those are going to get any serious game time in that match, and what we probably will see instead is some of the youngsters coming through, and therefore the older players getting, not the older players, but the established first teamers getting a proper rest. And as a result, that means we can be a little more carefree with who we choose, and we can actually play the first team and the best players that are available. I know Jurgen Klopp's already said that he doesn't have the luxury to rotate or prioritise. He basically just plays whatever players are fit, but what also comes into that is what players are in and not in these red zones when it comes to injuries. So Fabinho, by all means, he probably was available for every single game over the last couple of weeks, but we've seen him get rests because Jurgen Klopp knows that as a fitness thing, you can't just keep pushing these players through brick walls, whereas now we've got the room for manoeuvre, and therefore we can start every player who's not permanently injured because no one actually needs a rest. So Matip and Fabinho will be the two centre-halves. I think either side of them, I think it will be Andrew Robertson as the left-back, almost definitely, and if Trent is fit, then he'll probably play right back. If not, I think the role goes to Nico Williams, who had a good performance against Ajax, so it'd be nice to see him back in the side to allow him to build on that a little bit. But like I said, if Trent's fit, and if I had to put money on it, I'd bank on him probably being the case, because he's been back in training. It looks like his rehabilitation has been handled very, very well. It doesn't look like there's too many underlying issues, certainly nothing we have heard about. Anything can, of course, change between now and Sunday evening. As I said, even Jurgen Klopp doesn't know whether he's going to start Trent for the game, but I think it's quite likely that he does come into the side. And listen, even if he's not quite available, I think Williams probably plays an hour and then Trent comes in for a little bit of a half hour, because at the end of the day as well, he's probably not going to play in that game against Midtjylland, unless, of course, he doesn't play on Sunday and Jurgen Klopp wants to use that match to build up his sharpness. But if he's available anyway, then we can use him on Sunday, knowing that if there's any minor niggles or anything with his recovery, he's then got a whole week to get over those before the game against Fulham the weekend after. So I think Trent does probably start at right back ahead of that back four. In the midfield, I think we go with what is working at the moment, which is Jordan Henderson, Curtis Jones and Gini Wijnaldum. I did think you could maybe go with a 4-2-3-1, also with trying to get as many attackers on the pitch in mind. But I think if any midfielder is going to get a rest, it's probably going to be Gini Wijnaldum, because the bloke's played so many games. I know it's not showing. He was able to just sprint during stoppage time of the game against Ajax like he had absolutely no games in his legs whatsoever, whereas we know the truth is the guy's been running through brick walls for Liverpool recently. So I'd love to see him given a rest. But if you're playing a 4-2-3-1, I think Curtis Jones, as much as he's improved the defensive side of his game recently, isn't quite ready for that role. I think if he were to play that formation, he would actually fit more in that 3 just behind the striker. So if Jones was the one who needed a rest, then by all means 4-2-3-1, Henderson and Gini as the 2. But I think because Gini's probably the one who needs the rest, we'll probably start with the 3, and then we can fiddle around with it a little bit later on in the game. If necessary, then oh, that's gone again. If necessary, then Fabinho can come into the midfield. Gini Wijnaldum can come off. Jones can either push forward or come off for someone else, and Nat Phillips or Reece Williams can fill in at centre half for a bit. But from the start, I think we go with the same midfield that played very, very well against Ajax, and then in front of them, I think the attack is going to be Salah, Firmino, and Mane. I think we've rotated on a pretty game-by-game basis. I can't think of a game where we've started the same front 3 or 4 necessarily 2 games in a row since Diogo Jota really burst on the scene, and I think Firmino definitely showed how he balances out the front 3 in the game against Ajax. I think Jota, Salah and Mane are all quite similar players, and that's not a bad thing. They've been signed because they all fit the profile of a Liverpool winger, and that's why Jota has been fitted into this Liverpool team seamlessly. And sometimes when all 3 of them play, as they did against Atalanta, it's great because they are so deadly on the counter-attack. But for a game like this, where we're at home and we're maybe expected to have a little bit more of the ball, I think you need the guile of Roberto Firmino in there. And listen, Jota's great from the start, but he's also an absolutely deadly option from the bench if you need to shake things up. So I'm sure he'll get some game time in this match, but I think from the start we go with the established classic Liverpool front 3. So taking a quick look at Wolves then, obviously last weekend they got a very, very good result against Arsenal at the Emirates, running out 2-1 winners, and they look like they've shaked up their system a little bit recently. One thing that stood out as well was the fact that Traore played really well. He still hasn't scored in 2020, and it would be sod's law that he gets a goal at Anfield on Sunday evening. But one thing he is doing is the thing he's always been very good for at Wolves, which is creating space and creating opportunities for other attackers. He's been being played in a more forward role now after starting the season as kind of an auxiliary right wing back. They've now changed from that 3-4-3 to a 4-2-3-1 system, probably to accommodate some of the changes in personnel and to allow Traore to play on the right hand side of that 3 behind the striker, which means he's a much better threat going forward. And every chance that they seem to have against Arsenal, including I think both of the goals, he doesn't assist them, but he starts the move, and he starts the move by playing well, drawing defenders towards him, using his skill as well as his strength, and of course that absolutely blistering pace to get past them, to create that space and then get the ball into the box. His delivery is always perfect as well to find players out, as we found out last season where he played a brilliant cross in to Raul Jimenez for them to score the equaliser at Molineux, which I think was like the first goal that Liverpool conceded in about 8 matches or something ridiculous like that. So we know how much of a threat he is, and he is finding form, and he terrorised Arsenal. And as I said, the change in system makes this game a little bit more interesting as well, because as I said at the top of the video, Wolves always give us a good game. These matches tend to be relatively even affairs, even though Liverpool have run out winners, I think, every single time since they were promoted back to the Premier League under Nuno Espirito Santo. But you'd never say that any of those wins were clear cut, that they were without incident. You know, looking back to, I think, the 2-1 last season, it takes a late goal from Firmino. The 1-0 at Anfield is a very, very tight affair where they have a goal disallowed for offside by VAR, and then we have a disallowed goal overturned by VAR. So, you know, in another world, they run away from that game 1-0 winners, and you probably couldn't begrudge them for it at the end of the day. I thought they did play well, and it was a pretty even match. So, as I said, they always give us a decent game, and it's possible that this change in system could bring about, alongside another good performance, a better result for them as well. And they did it on the road as well against Arsenal, so maybe they're set up to play away. Although I think one thing that stands out from that match is they beat Arsenal because they were better than Arsenal. It wasn't just that their system found out Arsenal, or that they took their chances and Arsenal didn't. They were better than Arsenal in every single way, because at the end of the day, Arsenal aren't great right now, and the table isn't lying. They are down in the bottom half, whereas Wolves are in 7th. But crucially, Liverpool are in 2nd. So you'd expect, even though Wolves will probably cause us problems and make the game difficult, you feel like Liverpool will still be the better team, both on paper and on the pitch. And while that doesn't always guarantee success, you'd like to think that generally the laws of averages prevail and Liverpool will come away with the win. Although, as I said, I think it will be a difficult game. I think the pressure's going to be on us regardless of what happens in the North London derby, because either we're going to be chasing Spurs or we will have been presented with a golden opportunity to end the weekend top of the table. Either way, I'm massively, massively looking forward to it. I hope you guys are too. Let me know what you think is actually going to happen in the game down in the comments below. Apart from that, that is all for today's video, so thank you guys very much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, as always, you know what to do. Hit the like button down there, hit that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back on Sunday evening after we've hopefully beaten Wolves and, fingers crossed, gone to the top of the Premier League table. Until then, bye for now.